of
One
economics.
nation, one election. Is this beneficial for our country? Here are the responses to this question. One nation, one election. Is this beneficial for our country? 61% of the respondents say yes, 32% say no. Note over there, 81% of the NDA voters say yes, this is beneficial for the country. Amongst the opposition voters, 48%. So the bigger number of opposition voters also saying this is beneficial for our country. Can one nation, one election be implemented? Because there are practical realities in the implementation of one nation, one election. 59% of the overall respondents are saying yes, they think one nation, one election can be implemented. 35% say no. Who will benefit? 20% are saying that NDA benefits. 15% say the India alliance benefits. All parties benefit, say 45%. Rajdeep, this seems to be another winning idea where, as far as convincing the public is concerned, the government seems to have a wide-ranging support. 61% of overall respondents say this is good for our country. 48% of opposition voters also think one nation, one election is good for our country.
No, I think these are interesting findings. I think they reflect the fact that, Rahul, one nation, one election is seen as a populist idea. It's a popular idea. It gives the impression out there that you're going to cut down on costs. We have too many elections in this country. That is in some way affecting governance. That's been the government narrative. And as your survey shows, and I presume this is cutting across classes and groups, there seems to be a fair amount of support for it. My worry is this is not an issue that can be decided on the street. One nation, one election is a constitutionally vexed issue. It's a fanciful idea, but it's an idea which, according to me, represents uniformity in diversity and not unity in diversity. Our constitution was built on the principle of unity in diversity, not uniformity in diversity, Rahul.
Not really, Rajdeep, because till the mid-60s, we had one nation, one election. We actually started out, Rajdeep, with one nation, one election. It's only after the mid-60s, as government started falling, that we fragmented into a non-one nation, one election. Earlier elections were held in the same cycle, Rajdeep.
Sure. Rahul, that was because at that particular time you started at the same point. In 1952, you started state and general elections at the same point, hence you had them every 5 years. But what we've seen over the last 50 years is that increasingly politics has become more competitive. I just want to give you one figure. As per the latest publication, May 23 Election Commission and subsequent notifications, there are 6 national parties, 54 state parties and 2,597 unrecognized parties. In Parliament alone, there are more than 20 parties or 25 parties represented, and there are about 14 non-NDA, non-BJP chief ministers out of 29 states. India is far more diverse today than it was in the 50s and 60s, and that in a sense needs to be respected. Let's be clear, this 52, 57, 62 argument that is made that elections then were held joint that's because they were all at the same starting point. Now we have a very, very different political ecosystem to what we had in the 50s and 60s. A single election, a single nation will work against the interests of several state governments that are ruled possibly by non-BJP governments. You will have to bring them on board. I'm not saying that you don't have to have a debate on it. Please have a debate. But this debate has to be done through a spirit of consensus, Rahul. It cannot be just ramrodded from the top, as appears to be the case, or because, as your survey says, 61% are in support of it. Therefore, let's just completely junk the present system and go back or try to create a single election, single nation. I don't think this can work through populist referenda on the street. It has to work through really working on the constitution and bringing parties together. If they all agree, well and good. But if they don't, we must respect the fact that we are a diverse, discordant democracy. That's what our democracy is about. My last point, Rahul, is I think that the real question is not single nation, single election. It's how are you going to control money power in elections. That's what I think should be the focus. The manner in which money power has subverted the electoral process should be the focus of our policy makers, not these fanciful ideas that may attract support but actually are rather hollow inside.
S.Y. Qureshi, I remember interviewing you on the day this story first came out, that there was a committee that will look at one nation, one election, and you sounded quite averse to the idea, saying it's very impractical to implement. Now, how do you square your responses on the practicality with the overwhelming public support that this idea seems to enjoy. 61% of the respondents think this is beneficial for our country. Mr. Qureshi.
You know, Rahul, this topic arose about 10 years ago, and the very first article when I wrote, the title given by the newspaper was Desirable but Not Feasible. But I got a lot of flack for even using the word desirable. They say it's not even desirable for constitutional reasons, as Rajdeep pointed out. Secondly, this argument, initially for the first 10 years, it was simultaneous. Now we are going back to history. Very nice. But then go back to history after that also. We were simultaneous because that was the constitutional beginning. And why did it get staggered? That will happen again. You start, come back to square one, but then the same thing will start over again. Somewhere 20 MPs change side, one party leaves the coalition, Lok Sabha falls. What happens to the 28 assemblies? Why should they be disturbed? Or conversely, something happens in the state. Why should the entire country
Let
be
Syed
disturbed?
Zafar Islam respond to your very strong argument. Now imagine that you lost the election in Madhya Pradesh. Kamal Nath is Chief Minister. You've spoken to Jyotiraditya Scindia. You've taken him and a whole bunch of MLAs with him. What happens? You can't switch. Then you're stuck with one nation, one election. This goes against what you yourself and your party have been doing over the last 9 years.
Well, Rahul, the Honorable Prime Minister and many of our senior leaders have very often have spoken about it, that we need to have a mindset to create an atmosphere where one nation and one election can become feasible. As of now, I think that it cannot be done in isolation by Bharatiya Janata Party or our government alone. It has to be.
No, but respond in the real world. Arunachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh. These are all examples where you've not allowed opposition governments to continue running their full term, and you've done some jugaad, some hodgepodge to bring them down. Then how will that happen in one nation, one election?
No, these are two different things. See, people are unhappy with their party and they want to join a party which is actually serving the people. Then they are welcome. But if the system does not allow, if there is a restriction of people switching from one side to another, even with an intention to lead to serve the people, then it's a different case. As of now, there is a process where one can follow and can join any other party, and if the government can be formed, why not? But one nation, one election is something where it's a very good concept, but cannot be done by Bharatiya Janata Party alone. All the political parties should come up, and there should be consensus that yes, we need to have, everybody will have to sacrifice, not only Bharatiya Janata Party, but every single political party will have to sacrifice something or the other to make it a reality.